in South Beach early, and it was a tough night for Harden, Tim Legler, as they were all over him defensively.
Yeah, I mean, Miami basically taking the position without Joel Embiid. They're going to force other people to have to beat them, load up on Harden as much as they can.
And turning defense into offense there with Jimmy Butler. Meanwhile, Tyler Hero was really the hero in this game, coming off the bench for 25 points and 7 assists, knocking down threes everywhere you look. Adebayo to Hero here, and as they turn the defense into offense again. And it was Miami with a convincing second half, 106-92. We'll show you Hero knocking down one of his 4 threes. So again, Miami takes game one, and in the absence of Joel Embiid, major struggles for the Sixers. And Tim Legler, who running for office, we'd have a podium all of a sudden working here.
Just like high school, free chocolate milk for everybody in the cafeteria.
But you were going to show us specifically what you mean when you talk about what they're doing against Harden.
I talked about it earlier, just winning that matchup in front of him to create situations where now he can take advantage, and the defenders have to make decisions. He's not winning those. And here's a first example, and you see James, he comes down, he's just going to let guys clear out. Now this hurts him a little bit right here because there's a non-threat on the strong side. So that means right off the bat, you can just stay on the edge of the lane, and you can see the way that they are loaded up. I mean, this is what James Harden is looking at. He sees 5 defenders in the lane, and when he sees that and he's got a non-shooter to the right side, that means he's going to do something predictable. And you can see, this is why I wanted to illustrate this. I mean, this is just a defender that should not be able to do this. Strus is already anticipating he's not going by him. So watch his hand come out well before James Harden goes to release this ball, which gives him a great contest up top. And that's a very difficult shot. And again, it's all correlated to the fact that he can't blow by. This one I love. Now, this is P.J. Tucker. Obviously, P.J. Tucker's a great defender, but he does it more with physical strength, Greedy. Normally, when James Harden would see a defender with his top foot up, his weight up high, right, James Harden is going to destroy this and get into the paint. And now the options are there when you make these other defenders react to you. And when they do that, you've got kickouts here, potentially a kick out to the opposite corner, or how about James Harden just getting to the rim and finishing? The problem is, Greeny, he doesn't win this. And watch what P.J. Tucker does. He bottles him up, so when James Harden starts to go, he ends up stopping, loses the ball, goes the other way. And then this last one I think is maybe the best illustration of all. This is a center switching out, albeit an elite defensive center. It's still a center. And this is what I'm talking about. Again, Bam Adebayo's top foot is up. James Harden needs to go back and forth with this dribble, and then at some point he puts on the Jets, and this guy's in his rearview mirror. And now you can force weak side reactions that are going to make your shooters part of the game. The problem is he doesn't win this. He can't go by the center. So as a result, again, a very difficult contested step back 3 because he's not creating that situation where now it's 5-on-4, and now I'm going to force weak side help, makes me a better passer or a better finisher, and he's not beating those guys.
So it's really 2 problems. On one level, it's the defense they're able to play in the absence of Embiid. On another level, it is just Harden's inability to beat the man that is guarding him. It used to be he's already thinking about the second guy. It's the first guy now who's giving him trouble.
And what I used to see is he'd go back and forth 6-8 times to really get your weight off balance. Now it's like 3, and he goes to something else, because he's going to end up playing with the ball too long without that last gear to go by people. And I think this is what you get, an inefficient player when you can't win that matchup.
All right, we're going to get Coach in here a little bit later in the show to sort of figure out what they can do to change things. Meanwhile, let's try and figure out what the Celtics can do to bounce back after they were handled pretty easily in their own building by the Bucks in Game 1. Giannis Antetokounmpo dominating in so many ways, despite not having a great shooting day. In fact, it was his 3rd worst shooting day in his playoff career. He still had a triple-double. He was so effective. Jason Tatum, meanwhile, shot just 33%. The team made only 10 two-point field goals in the game, which is the 2nd fewest in any playoff game of all time. And then a huge decision is looming. Marcus Smart, who's such an incredibly important piece of that team and the Defensive Player of the Year, he is questionable with a quad injury. He missed 6 games in January with that injury. Again, JB is here, but I want to bring in Wendy first. What do we know, Wendy, about the status of Marcus Smart for tonight's Game 2?
Yeah, he is listed as questionable. In listening to Ime Udoka, the coach, yesterday, it sounded like it was trending toward a game-time decision. They're going to see how he feels when he warms up. Greeny, I would be very surprised if Marcus Smart does not play in this game. I think he will go. The question is, how effective is he going to be moving? Because this isn't a pain tolerance issue, but really a restricted movement issue. This is the playoffs. No mercy. You know, as soon as he gets out on that court tonight, the Bucks are going to run him through some screens and test it out.
Okay, so there's one thing you never question about him, it's the toughness, right? You love him, you hate him, but you respect the toughness. So, J.B. Bickerstaff, again, head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers and a lifer in every conceivable way. Let's talk about the adjustment you make now if you're Boston. That big lineup with Portis starting alongside Antetokounmpo and Lopez for Milwaukee, it clearly caused all kinds of problems for Boston. Give me the coaching adjustment that the Celtics make tonight in Game 2.
They got to create more off-ball movement. What the Celtics have done in the past has been a very good isolation basketball team. With that size that the Bucks have, they've been able to load and just stand and protect the paint and shrink the floor. So put the ball in your big guys' hands, create some two-sided movement, see if you can cause some mistakes on the defense.
It's interesting because that's similar to what people were telling me that the Nets needed to do throughout that series against the Celtics, and they never were really able to do it. And people would tell me it's because that's kind of playing against type. That's not what they do. They give it to Durant and Kyrie and let them create. Similarly here, that's kind of what the Celtics do, right? They give it to Tatum, let him find something. Give it to Brown, let him find something. How do you play against type if that's not generally what you do offensively?
It's difficult, and that's why the Bucks have been preparing for this moment the entire season. They've done a great job of switching. They understand how to play with length. That's why they're the defending world champs, because they've gotten so good at it, and they know it's difficult for teams to make those adjustments in the playoffs.
Help me with this, Legs. How do they do that? Because I will admit to being stunned by what I saw in that Game 1. Boston's just complete inability to find any offense against Milwaukee.
They've got to, off their initial action, when those guys, either one of those guys are ISO and running ball screen, they've got to get the ball hopping to the other side out of the initial action. They typically like to come off and then go. Once you get the ball moving, and now you get Milwaukee's bigs rotating out of that, when the ball then changes sides of the floor back in their hands, they're probably going to be operating against a closeout defender. Now you can get to a pull-up 18-footer because the mid-range has to be part of this equation. And, JB, I just thought, if you're going to take 50 threes, right, and a far fewer percentage of twos, you don't have a chance to beat a team like Milwaukee. There's got to be greater balance in that, but you can't do it the way that you normally do against this type of length. You're going to have to get those guys chasing the ball a little bit.
And then, Wendy, I want to talk about Giannis. You were on yesterday when Big Pert came on here, and he made, I think, a pretty big statement. He said, as he watches Giannis now, he's getting LeBron in Cleveland vibes, which is to say that the East is going to run through that guy for a decade. I mean, LeBron ruined a lot of people's careers for a decade by owning the East. Are we ready to say Giannis is reaching that level right now?
Absolutely. I had flashbacks sitting in the TD Garden on a Sunday afternoon playoff game, watching a really great Celtics team have trouble with a transcendent player who didn't even play his best game, yet still made all of his teammates better in one. You know, LeBron repeatedly went up into the Celtics against great teams. Sometimes he won and sometimes he lost, but he always kept his team in the game because of his multi-talented ability. That is where Giannis is, and Giannis as a defender is probably at a higher level than LeBron even ever was.
Let me get a quick take from you on that, Legs. I mean, some might say, my goodness, now we're comparing him to a Mount Rushmore player, which is what LeBron James is. Is it a reasonable comparison?
I don't have a problem with it whatsoever. You think about this doesn't bode well for Boston. I think it's probably the worst offensive game he's going to have in this series was in Game 1. And they still won. He missed 16 shots in that game, had 5 turnovers, and missed 5 free throws, and was still by far the most dominant player on the floor.
All right, we'll have more hoops as we go.